I didn't build this place to impress anyone. I built it to be left the hell alone. Nestled in the evergreens of Oregon's coastal backwoods, my home was never meant to be part of anything resembling a community. That word made me itch. Gated communities, neighborhood councils, HOAs. I dealt with enough bureaucracy during my 15 years as a federal investigator. When I left that life behind and inherited my grandfather's land, I swore off all forms of organized nonsense. My grandfather had been a World War II vet and a fierce advocate for private ownership. He didn't fight Nazis, so his grandson could be told what color his mailbox had to be. So, I built a self-sufficient, solar-powered, rain-catching bunker-reinforced slice of paradise. No neighbors within shouting distance. No HOA dues. No lawn inspection committees. Just trees, birds, silence, and the occasional deer who had more sense than most people I'd met in my career. That piece of heaven lasted exactly 4 years. I first heard the name Silverwood Grove when I stopped at a local hardware store to pick up some spare parts for my backup generator. There it was, a shiny new pamphlet on the counter, thick, glossy pages showing off a planned, spiritually minded eco-community for forward thinkers. It sounded like a yoga cult met a zoning board and had a baby. Then I saw something that made my jaw lock. Page 3, a full-color map of the area, and there it was, me land, my house, labeled as a potential expansion site. Future meditation retreat. I stared at it for a long minute, long enough for the cashier to awkwardly clear his throat. I didn't say a word, just took the pamphlet, drove home, and poured myself 2 fingers of bourbon at 2 in the afternoon. A week later, a woman appeared at the edge of my property. She wore a white linen pantsuit, had hair the color of lemon meringue, and walked with the kind of confidence that said she'd never heard the word no in her entire life. She didn't use the gate, just stepped over the low wire fence like she was inspecting a lemon grove in Tuscany. Beautiful, she said, spinning slowly in a circle on my gravel driveway. This is where the light flows best. I can feel it. I opened the front door, shotgun cradled, but not aimed. I didn't say anything. She smiled, like I'd just offered her tea. I'm Karen Delaney, she said, president of the Silverwood Grove Homeowners Association. But really, I'm more like the spiritual mother of the community. I blinked. She stepped forward, undeterred by the 12-foot, private property. No trespassing sign behind her. We've identified this space as a crucial energetic node, a beacon. It's underutilized in its current form, and well, selfishness creates imbalance. I wasn't sure if she was speaking in tongues or trying to sell me a yoga class. I'm sorry, I said flatly. Are you lost? Her smile widened. No, I'm found. And soon, so will this home be. By its true purpose. She handed me a thick, official-looking envelope, stamped with a wax seal that looked suspiciously like someone had bought it off Etsy. This is a notice of requisition. Under the bylaws of Silverwood Grove, Section 8 properties designated for spiritual integration must be transitioned into community stewardship. I didn't take the envelope. I'm not in your community, I said. She tilted her head like I just said I didn't believe in gravity. But this land has chosen. I shut the door. That was the last quiet day I had for a long time. 3 days after Karen graced my driveway, the notice of requisition arrived by certified mail, same wax seal, same theatrical stationery, same spiritual jargon dressed up as legal language. According to this masterpiece of delusion, my property had been reassigned to community stewardship under emergency spiritual zoning protocols. It also listed a mandatory vacate by date 72 hours from the moment I opened the envelope. I laughed, not because it was funny, but because my brain refused to accept this wasn't a joke. Somewhere, someone had to be screwing with me. But deep down, I knew better. I did a little digging. 2 phone calls later, one to the county assessor's office, one to an old buddy still buried deep in real estate fraud investigations, and the picture got a lot darker. Someone had filed a preliminary inclusion request for my land into Silverwood Grove HOA. It wasn't official yet, but it was enough to generate a temporary record in the county GIS system, which, surprise, some local zoning maps had picked up and printed as if it were gospel. And who filed that request? A name I didn't recognize: Douglas Ryan, a low-level employee at the county land records office. Been there for 15 years. Invisible, which meant either lazy or useful. I had a strong hunch which one applied here. Karen wasn't working alone. That same day, a local blog posted a new article, Silverwood Grove's Expansion Plan. The Sanctuary Project, accompanied by aerial drone shots of my property. I recognized the angle from a trespassing quadcopter I'd swatted out of the air a week ago. The caption read, "Future site of the Dome of Reflection." What the hell is the Dome of Reflection? I spent the next few hours reviewing every security camera on my land. I didn't see Karen again, but someone had come near the west tree line, stood silently for several minutes, facing the house. No motion, just watching. I filed a formal cease and desist letter, certified mail, notarized. Sent one to the HOA's legal rep and one directly to Karen. I knew it wouldn't stop her. I sent it to build a paper trail. The next morning, I stepped outside and found a painted symbol on my gate. Pale blue paint crude spiral at the center, a stick figure with outstretched arms below it. Stenciled words. "He who holds the light must release the stone." Whatever cultish nonsense that was, it had been sprayed at eye level, deliberate. Not meant to scare, meant to convert. And that's when the whisper campaign started. At the feed store, the cashier asked me if I was still holding out. Someone else mentioned property karma. Even my mailman, a guy who once admitted to peeing in Gatorade bottles during long routes, looked at me funny. Karen had begun her charm offensive. Her language of light, balance, and collective will was catching on among the spiritually bored and the aggressively nosy. I wasn't just an outsider anymore. I was an obstacle, a symbol of resistance. And in a town like this, that makes you a target. By day 4, I started hearing the phrase, "energetic steward," more than I heard my own name. By day 5, someone tried to serve me a community integration welcome packet. I dropped it into my burn barrel without reading it. But what really sealed it, what made me realize this was more than just land, was the email I intercepted. A mutual contact forwarded it from a mailing list Karen had set up. The subject line read, "The final holdout." Inside, she wrote, "He resists because his identity is built on separation, but we will help him see that individuality is violence. Ownership is fear. Soon, the home will come into alignment." That's when I knew. This wasn't about HOA regulations. This was war. I never thought spiritual warfare would come in the form of county code violations, but Karen was nothing if not creative. The first was a visit from a building inspector. He claimed someone had submitted an anonymous tip about an illegal energy structure on my land. When I asked what the hell that meant, he shrugged and said there were concerns about a non-regulated power source. He meant my solar panels. The guy wasn't aggressive, actually seemed embarrassed, but still snapped pictures and mumbled something about needing to file a report just to be safe. Then came the fire marshal. Another anonymous complaint this time. It was about flammable materials stored improperly near the residence. Translation: my backup diesel canisters stored in a locked shed with proper containment, legal, labeled, inspected 2 years ago, but now suddenly suspect. Then came Child Protective Services. That one almost made me laugh. Until the woman standing on my porch said she had to check for minors in unsafe living conditions. According to her report, a child had been heard crying from within a sealed structure. I live alone. The only thing that makes noise at night is my dog, and even he's too polite to cry. Growls, maybe, when there's a raccoon nearby. But crying? No. I invited her in, showed her the place, offered coffee. She left 15 minutes later looking bewildered but professional. Said she had to file her findings. I could almost hear Karen smirk through the trees. The spiral symbols started showing up more often, painted on fence posts, carved into the bark of my trees. One morning, I found a stack of smooth stones carefully arranged in a pyramid on my porch. On top was a laminated card with a quote, "Harmony begins when resistance ends." It wasn't just graffiti anymore. It was ritual. People I barely knew started treating me like an infestation. I'd walk into the general store, and conversations would stall. One woman whispered the word dissonant as I passed her in the baking aisle. What the hell did that even mean? And then came Jerry. He'd been my nearest neighbor for years, nearest being a generous term, since his house was almost a mile down the old forest road. We'd exchanged maybe 10 words total, mostly about deer population and road conditions. Now he was suddenly chatty, friendly, even invited me over for beer. I went, curious. His living room was unrecognizable, full of scented candles, crystal bowls, and a large poster reading, "The New Way is Now." He poured me kombucha and told me he'd join the light. I asked if that meant he'd join the HOA. He said, No, it's more than that. It's a realignment." I finished my drink and left. Later that night, I found a copy of the Light Doctrine tucked under the windshield wiper of my truck. So I did what I always do when people push me too far. I got methodical. I documented everything. Took photographs, filed incident reports, set up additional trail cams along the forest line, upgraded my gate's locking system, installed a secondary security feed backed up remotely. And I started looking into the county land records again. Late one night, I received a tip from my old bureau contact. He'd done some quiet digging and found an email thread between Karen and Douglas Ryan, the land clerk. One line stood out like a flare in the dark. We'll need the boundary redrawn before the equinox. Our next phase can't begin while the stoneholder resists. Stoneholder. That was me. I'd seen the term in one of the symbols before, small stick figure holding a rock above its head. This wasn't just harassment. It was a plan. A weird, esoteric, bureaucratically structured cult with Karen at the center, county employees under her thumb. And I was standing in the way of their next phase. They wanted to break me, humiliate me, exhaust me into submission. I'd seen cartel bosses try the same thing. Didn't work then, wouldn't work now. It happened on the fourth night after the so-called requisition notice. Just past 2 a.m., when the woods are black enough to make you feel like you're floating through space. I was awake, sipping cold coffee, going through security footage for the fifth night in a row. Something about the last clip I'd reviewed, a shadow that moved just a beat too slowly near the south tree line, had kept me wired and uneasy. I trusted my gut. My gut used to get subpoenas signed. Then it came ping from the perimeter sensor. North fence. Motion detected. I froze. Second ping. Then a third. I hit the main screen. 3 heat signatures moving slow. Methodical. The thermal camera lit up their shapes in bleeding red all male. From the size and gait, one held what looked like a crowbar. Another had something clipped to his belt, a radio, maybe. The third moved with his hands out like he'd walked this route before. They wore jackets with the HOA logo ironed on the back, subtle like impersonating authority, made it legal. I flipped the switch. The system roared to life. Floodlights flared on with a snap, like a guillotine. The siren screamed across the valley, deep, pulsing alarm set to the same tone we used in field ops for hostage extractions. Then the voice calm, clear, pre-recorded. This is private property. You are trespassing. Your activity is being recorded. Law enforcement has been notified. They panicked. The one with the crowbar tripped backward into the ditch by the fence. I watched him tumble, twist, and slam his leg against a rock shelf. The radio guy froze like a deer in headlights. The last one turned and bolted, crashing through underbrush like he'd forgotten what direction Earth was in. I let them go. I didn't need to intervene. My property was wired to handle people like this. All I had to do was sit back and collect evidence. By the time I stepped outside, armed and cloaked in shadows, all that remained was a scuff mark on the fence rail, a few fresh boot prints in the gravel, and one torn HOA patch snagged on a barbed wire tip. I collected it carefully, evidence. Then I retrieved the footage, all angles, high resolution, multiple cameras, crystal clear identification of faces, logos, tools, even audio. One guy yelled something about getting the Hearthstone before sunrise. Whatever the hell that meant. At sunrise, I drove into town. USB stick in my pocket. Badge from my old bureau days still tucked in the glove box, not to flash it, just to remind myself. I'd once stared down worse people than HOA thugs with spiritual delusions. I walked into the sheriff's office, calm, prepared, and absolutely certain I had the upper hand. I did not. Mr. Kinslow, the deputy at the front desk, said, barely glancing up, Detective Branson wants to speak with you. He's been expecting you. Expecting me? That word scraped something raw. Branson met me in interview room, place I'd questioned more than a few suspects in a past life. Now I was the one being offered coffee, told to just sit tight while he reviewed conflicting reports. Conflicting? I raised an eyebrow. He sighed, pulling out a manila folder like it was loaded. We received a complaint last night from Silverwood Grove HOA. Their president filed a statement claiming 3 community officers were injured during a wellness inspection attempt. My jaw tightened. Wellness inspection? I repeated, but I kept my voice flat. They claim you've been illegally occupying an asset meant for public integration and spiritual reallocation. He continued, tapping the report. She also alleges you've installed military-grade traps around the property. Perimeter hazard, I said. You mean a ditch in gravity? He didn't smile. Political? That word again. Political. He slid the folder back toward himself. Bring me whatever evidence you've got. I'll log it. But you need to understand, she filed first. Technically, you're under active complaint review. We have to process both sides. I reached into my coat pocket, pulled out the USB stick, and dropped it onto the table. Then process this. I left the station without another word. In the parking lot, I sat behind the wheel for a long time, staring into nothing. I'd seen this playbook before. Weaponize process. File early. Claim victimhood before facts can surface. Beat the truth to the punch and bury it in paperwork. Karen didn't want my house. She wanted my name under hers in the database, because in her world, control wasn't taken by force, it was taken by form. There's a peculiar quiet in a county courtroom just before a hearing, the kind that hums beneath the fluorescent lights and wraps around your nerves like a slow, invisible python. I'd been in 100 courtrooms before, but this one felt different because this time, I wasn't the one asking the questions. I was the one on the docket. The case was officially labeled Silverwood Grove, HOAV. Eric Kinslow, and the charge list read like someone had dropped acid during a law seminar. Community obstruction, reckless endangerment via environmental traps, unauthorized occupation of reassigned spiritual infrastructure. The clerk read it all out loud without flinching, and then she walked in. Karen Delaney, clad in flowing cream-colored linen that looked more appropriate for a guided moon retreat than a legal proceeding. Her hair was pinned in a halo braid, and she carried a leather folio pressed to her chest like it contained the secrets of the universe. She smiled at me like a pastor seeing a wayward sheep return to church. The judge, a practical man named Donnelly, with a perpetual frown and zero tolerance for grandstanding, adjusted his glasses as she took her seat. He raised an eyebrow. Miss Delaney, I see you've elected to represent your organization yourself. Yes, Your Honor, she said with serene certainty. Truth needs no filter. He blinked. All right. Her opening statement was something else. She didn't talk about property lines, legal precedent, or municipal codes. She talked about vibrations, about energetic harmony, about how the ancient grid of consciousness had chosen my house as a beacon for the collective awakening. She called herself a steward of transition and described my resistance as a blockade of fear constructed by the ego-bound mind. I didn't object. I let her go on. You don't interrupt a person who's hanging themselves with monologue. When she finished, the courtroom was still. Judge Donnelly finally exhaled. Do you have documents? He asked. Karen stood tall. I have the map. She pulled out a hand-drawn card, a sprawling web of colored circles, spirals, and arrows converging on my property like a New Age war map. It had labels like Future Dome of Healing, Root Vortex, and Dead Centera Red Mark that labeled the Stoneholders' Bastion. That's when I stood. My attorney, former colleague from the Bureau's legal division, handed me the evidence packet we'd prepped for days. I walked it up myself. The judge took the USB drive and binder, already weary. Your Honor, I began. Let's start with the tangible. To adjust GIS parameters before the equinox realignment. Donnelly narrowed his eyes. This Rian, he a public employee? Yes, I said. Now on administrative leave, pending investigation. The county auditor's office confirmed he's received unreported donations from HOA-linked bank accounts. We continued. Exhibit G, a screenshot of Karen's final holdout email blast, declaring that I must release the structure into alignment or be spiritually neutralized. Exhibit H, HOA financials, obtained by subpoena, showing tens of thousands spent Ono to Alu Community Wellness. That translated into spa weekends, Himalayan salt tiles, and a $12,000 trip Karen took to Arizona, labeled Desert Clarity Transmission. By the end, Judge Donnelly looked like a man who'd been hit by a freight train of absurdity and hadn't quite figured out where his shoes went. Karen rose again and shaken. Your Honor, this is all being misunderstood. These documents are symptoms of transition. The collective is shifting, and those who cling to material structures cannot perceive the new pattern forming. Donnelly sighed hard. Miss Delaney, let me be clear. This isn't a philosophical forum. This is a legal courtroom, and in this courtroom, we do not repossess homes based on vibes. He turned to the bailiff. Take her into custody. Karen blinked, stunned for the first time. You can't detain energy. We're detaining you, ma'am. The bailiff replied, already walking toward her. She didn't resist, only closed her eyes and whispered, "This will echo." The courtroom rustled as she was led out. Some of her supporters gasped. One man chanted. The judge banged his gavel until silence returned. He turned to me. "Mr. Kinslow, you'll be pleased to know we're recommending criminal charges not just against Ms. Delaney, but against the clerk involved and any HOA officers linked to this fraud. You'll also be entitled to pursue civil damages." I nodded quietly. It wasn't satisfaction I felt. It was confirmation. I hadn't been crazy. They had the arrest. It wasn't the end. It was just the pull of the thread that unraveled the whole tapestry. Once Karen was in custody, everything she'd built started crumbling like a sandcastle facing high tide. The county launched an audit into Silverwood Grove's HOA finances, and within 48 hours, the spiritual ledger they kept on a private Google Drive became a public embarrassment. Turns out when your accounting system is based on vibrational flow equivalencies, the IRS doesn't see that as spiritually enriching just fraud. $12,000 for a Desert Clarity transmission? That was just the tip of the delusional iceberg. HOA funds had also paid for custom curtains in Karen's home built as light filtration rituals, imported crystals from Peru, energy anchors, and something called a communal quantum frequency tent, which appeared to be a teepee with LED lights and Bluetooth speakers. Most damning of all, several transfers to private PayPal accounts, listed under spiritual-sounding pseudonyms. Hollowhawk, Balance Walker, and my personal favorite Karen Ascends. Once the press got wind, it was over. Local news anchors said her name like it was an urban legend. National outlets picked up the story as a bizarre cross between a failed cult and a zoning scam. The HOA board resigned en masse. One member fled the state. I'm not kidding. Fold after it turned out he was forging signatures on inclusion ballots for non-present members. Apparently, one of the names he forged had been dead for 3 years. Douglas Ryan, a land clerk who tampered with my GIS records, was indicted on 4 counts of document fraud and conspiracy to abuse his official position. He lawyered up fast, but his emails were already damning enough to lock in a plea deal: 6 years, no parole. As for Karen, the judge didn't go easy. She was convicted on multiple charges: fraud, trespassing, false reporting, and attempted illegal seizure of property through deceptive zoning filings. The court also mandated a full psychiatric evaluation. She got 12 years, plus court-ordered therapy. I didn't celebrate. I didn't gloat. But when the verdict was read, I did allow myself a deep, slow exhale that felt like it came from somewhere under the floorboards of my soul. A month later, I received a letter from the county's legal office. I'd been awarded $150,000 in compensation damages for defamation, legal costs, and what the court referred to as stress inflicted by targeted community manipulation. I used a small piece of it to replace my gate stronger steel, higher clearance, reinforced locking system on it. I added a new signed black metal, white letters. This property is not for spiritual alignment. It is not for public awakening. It is mine. Everything else, I left just the way it was. Because I don't believe in turning your home into a fortress. I believe in letting the ruins of your enemies speak for themselves. It's funny how quiet the woods get when there's no war echoing through them. The trees stand taller now. Maybe it's just that I notice them more. There's a weight that's lifted from this place, not just the threat, but the noise of it. The ideological chanting, the false notices, the sense that someone was always watching, just beyond the tree line, waiting to liberate something that was never theirs to begin with. Now, it's just me, the dog, and the sound of wind through pine needles. The new gate stands solid matte black steel, with a weighty click when it locks like a safe door. The sign beside it gets a few chuckles from delivery guys. This is not an HOA. This is not a commune. This is private land. Knock if you're normal. I get visitors, sometimes reporters, mostly, or law students, writing about the Kinslow precedent. One guy from a libertarian podcast called me the Homefront Patriot. I didn't have the heart to correct him. But the one that got meth one I remember was a teenager, 17 maybe. He came with his dad. Said he wanted to shake my hand. That he'd watched the trial footage on YouTube and had never seen someone shut down a cult using documents and a USB stick. You made bureaucracy badass, he said. Hell of a compliment. I don't pretend I changed the world, but I did redraw one little corner of it. Made it clear that lines on a map don't change just because someone draws them again in crayon and sprinkles essential oils on top. Karen's name still floats around like a ghost. Some say she meditates daily in prison, still preaching about vibrational convergence. I hope for everyone's sake that her next alignment is with a therapist. As for me, I sit on the porch with my boots up and a black lab named Mayor snoozing at my feet. Sometimes I sip coffee. Sometimes it's whiskey. Sometimes both. Nobody tells me what to do here. Because this house site didn't just survive a siege. It became legend. And legends, like boundaries, are best when clearly marked.